president believes our local law enforcement has far too many military-grade weapons, and the way to get people back in touch with their local cops is to take those weapons away. This, as a lot of cops will tell you, they've been outgunned for years when the crooks get better guns than they are allowed to carry and often have no other recourse than a higher grade of ordnance. This is just one of the matters at hand as we enter the arena, and let us go ahead and welcome into the fray then an advisor on LGBT policy and racial justice at the Center for American Progress. Welcome in Danielle Moodie-Mills, and he is the veteran syndicated economist, syndicated columnist, and professor of business at the University of Maryland, Peter Morici. I thank you both for joining us today.
Nice to be with you.
Thanks for having us.
All right, Danielle, I'm going to start with you on this one. The president says new restrictions on the use of military equipment by police departments. He says that the police need to get themselves more in touch with the community here, and coming out in full military garb and almost riot gear does not send the right message. But what about those cops who say that the criminals themselves have just gotten bolder over the years and they've got to do this to protect themselves?
I think the problem that we have seen over the past couple of weeks and actually the past couple of months in Ferguson and in Baltimore and in various other places around where we've seen a lot of unrest is that as much equipment as the cops have, they actually do not have any of the training that allows them to be using that equipment in a safe way. Right? They are walking around with huge AK-47s that they're raised up and pointing, and any military person would tell you that that is not at all how they carry on when they are in combat zones in Afghanistan and what have you around the world. So I think it's really important that they be trained with the gear that they received, and that it's not just given to them as, hey, it's Christmas.
All right, Peter, there is a point there about just making sure that they're trained properly, and others who will say, well, wait a minute now, let the SWAT teams carry the hard stuff. Let somebody come in here, let the cop be the cop, and let the really, the emergency responders, if you will, let them be the ones to carry the hard weapons.
Well, that's nice to say, but what happens if a policeman only with a handgun is confronted by somebody with an automatic weapon? A Newtown sniper, somebody like that with a semi-automatic. He has to be able to act. As for the president, you know, when he goes down Pennsylvania Avenue, there are snipers on the roofs of the buildings. Is he willing to let the Secret Service just have handguns? After all, they're law enforcement officers.
Would you, though, not admit that the police departments themselves, we have reached the point in our society, Peter, where the cops have got to get back to being cops on the beat, because it seems that far too often the first time people see a police officer is when they are full-deck riot gear, and that in itself may send a message.
Well, you know, I'm having a lot of trouble accepting that. I live in Washington, D.C., where the policemen ride bicycles in Georgetown, and where they're very much on the beat and accessible. In suburban areas, it's different. A place like Ferguson, which is largely a suburban type of area, you can't cover the streets on a beat by walking. When I'm in New York City, I see cops walking around. So I think that this is a propaganda campaign to basically disarm the police within minority communities rather than face some really hard problems they have within themselves. You know, constantly the blame gets projected outward. What about responsibility? The New York Times ran a very interesting piece on life in Sandtown. That's the neighborhood where the man in Baltimore came from.
Yep.
Then you got 15-year-olds dealing drugs so they can go to Disneyland.
We're going to take a moment and revisit this as it comes by again, because I'll tell you, it's something that I think we've got to look at here, and the president is going to have to, I think he's going to get a lot of pushback on this. I got about a minute and a half left on here. Danielle, let me come to you on this. Louis C.K., the comic, hosts the Saturday Night Live 40th year finale, has jokes about racism and child molestation. Did you see it, and were you offended?
I did see it, and I thought that it was over the top. I actually didn't find it funny at all, and I know that some comedians like to push the envelope, and I know that that's what he is famous for doing, but I did not think that jokes about child molestation, especially, which he went on and on and on about for at least 2-3 minutes of his bit, was just completely outrageous, and you could hear the moans from the audience of like shock, like what are you talking about? So I think that he stepped over a line.
I got to tell you here, Peter, even I mean, I was watching it, and my mouth was a little bit agape. I'm going, really, do you want to make jokes about this? However, comics push the envelope. They make jokes about things that are uncomfortable for us. So is there really a line?
Well, there isn't a line in terms of censorship. There are very few words, as you know, you're prohibited from using in broadcasting. But what constrains people like you and me is the audience, is the reaction of audiences, of viewers, and so forth. And this comic got a reaction, a very negative one. And I think that in itself will serve as a restraint. The comments were in poor taste, and he got a message.
You know, I think something else on this, Danielle, about 30 seconds left. He talked about the fact that that he suffers from mild racism. I thought the racism part on his bit there was actually pretty true to form. I thought it actually said a couple of interesting things.
Yeah,
Well,
I didn't have
think
any problem with that part. I thought that too. I thought it was true to form. I thought it was being really honest and painting pictures of various scenarios that you could end up in, and let's have a real open kind of dialogue about it. But the child molestation piece to me was way just out of line.
Yeah, it's what comics do. They're supposed to get themselves a reaction, and guess what? He got one because it's all over Twitter and social media right now. Stand by. We're going to take a break, come back. Peter Morici and Danielle Moodie-Mills. And when we do come back, what happens when a company creates a T-shirt that uses an iconic image and people think it's being disrespectful to the military? Next on MidPoint. Let's get back to work with advisor on LGBT policy, racial justice at the Center for American Progress, Danielle Moodie-Mills, and veteran economist, columnist, professor of business at the University of Maryland, Peter Morici. All right, Peter, I'm going to start with you on this one. Actor James Woods, you may remember him from Casino and some of the others, and maybe the occasional Simpsons episode as well. He praised the death sentence handed out to Dzhokhar Tsarnaev in a tweet. He said the truly troubling thing about the Tsarnaev verdict is that we can only kill him once. And then he puts out another one, fry, revive, and refry, if ever anyone deserved it. He's taken a lot of heat for this, but I'll tell you, there's also an awful lot of people who agree with him, Peter.
Well, a lot of people were sorry to see the death sentence because life in prison for someone at this level is very, very, very difficult. You're isolated. You get to see people maybe 1 hour a day. A lot of folks thought that life in prison would be a harsher punishment for a 21-year-old. I guess when somebody commits such a horrific act, there is no punishment that's adequate to satisfy people's desire for justice.
Danielle, I think that's probably what he is thinking of and what a lot of people that I know in Boston who've been thinking of. They're saying, yes, okay, the martyr thing works into this, but this is a guy, if anybody deserves the death penalty and deserves it immediately, this is a guy who deserves it, and James Woods actually is speaking for a lot of people.
I mean, yes, it's obvious that he deserves the death penalty. I don't even think that was like a question. I think the question really is about the tone of his tweets, and I think a lot of celebrities get on Twitter and they don't think before they tweet. So a lot of people may agree and what have you, but it's like, did he really need to say that? I'm not 100% sure it was necessary.
Well, I don't know. There were a lot of people who would say that it would be necessary.
Especially the second tweet.
Well, but sure, but he had said more than that. He said it is God's job to make sure he gets proper punishment, and God never misses. No, we can't, but we can show his Muslim brothers what will be done to them. I mean, he really went overboard on this, and you got to admit, though, that there is a part of society that probably agrees with him.
Yeah, but it's the death penalty, right? So he's going to pay for his actions. But the idea of reviving him and frying him again and kind of, I mean, we're not barbarians. That's what separates us from other people. So I don't really get the point of his extenuating comments.
All right, here comes something else which has people a little bit up in arms. Under Armour, the manufacturer, the shirt manufacturer, sneakers, whatever you want, sporting goods. They had a T-shirt that came out, and we're going to show it. They call it the Band of Ballers T-shirt, and this is basically the old Iwo Jima raising of the flag symbol, which shows basketball players raising a basketball, a portable basketball, Jim, if you will, a net. Danielle, there are people very upset about this. Does this upset you in any way? Is this something that you think that shouldn't be done because it's so iconic?
I didn't think it was incredibly tasteful. I was really surprised that Under Armour did something like that and didn't think that people were going to get pushback for it. Maybe if they had come out and shown that image and said that these shirts, proceeds of these shirts are going to support our men and women in service, then people would have really been excited about it and thought it was a good idea. But just the image, when I saw the side by side, I was just like, I don't think it was a good idea.
Peter, here's something else too, because you have American flag T-shirts, you have American flag bikinis, you have American flag bandanas, everything else is out there as well. Why should this be any different?
Well, I tend to agree with that. It's the old story of if people will buy it, fine. If it's in bad taste, then people won't buy it. But there's such a thing as freedom of expression, and it wasn't used in a profane way. So I thought that the veterans were overreacting, but of course they're entitled to their own sensibilities, and if they don't like the product, they don't have to buy it.
That's what it's all about. It's all about marketing and money. And, of course, Under Armour has stopped selling the Band of Ballers T-shirt after getting all the grief and criticism as well. All right, about a minute left. Here we go. Peter, to you first. George Stephanopoulos. His colleague at ABC, Carol Simpson, says, wait a minute, he's not really a journalist in the first place. We all know the story by now. Should he be fired?
Oh, I don't think that George should be fired. I've said that previously on this show. But the notion that he's not a journalist is an excuse, that's absurd. If he's not a journalist, then he shouldn't be there. He is a journalist, and I think he just shouldn't be covering, the Clinton Foundation and things of that nature.
Is he just, though, a show host? Maybe that's what she's trying to make the point of here, just trying to make excuses.
Well, as show hosts, you got to be very careful about, because their biases can be reflected in a variety of subtle ways. So I wouldn't even be comfortable with him, chairing a session on the Clinton Foundation, so to speak, where there were various guests and putting together packages and things of that nature.
Danielle, do you think he should step down? Do you think perhaps maybe he just shouldn't host the debates, shouldn't be any closer to the political scene?
I don't think that he should be fired, but I definitely think that there needed to be a little bit more of a fine line between his disclosure of contributions and his alliance with the Clintons. And so going forward, I think that there should be somebody else that's covering the political aspects of 2016, because I think he's too close to it.
Well, but see, that's just it. ABC has made him in many ways. Other people have said even that he's now the face of ABC News because of the shows that he has. But I guess maybe one of my earlier guests said it best. They said, well, okay, if he wants to do Good Morning America and talk about cooking shows and all the rest, then that's just fine. But let's keep him away from politics for right now. Might not be a bad idea. Danielle, Moodie-Mills, Peter Morici, always a pleasure to see you both. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk to you both again.
Take care.
All right, take care now. It is the life of a daredevil. Not everybody can do it, and sometimes tragic things happen. We pay tribute to a man who was that daredevil. Next on MidPoint.